So we'll go ahead and start. All right, so welcome everyone. This is Budget Committee, first Budget Committee meeting of the season. Let's go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. Laura, you want to get started?
Laura Stevens.
Olivia Welch-Sheridan.
Brian Mazer.
Israel Carey.
Richard Manzo, Select Board Rep.
Jack Carbonell, alternate school board rep.
Elizabeth DeBrule, Chair.
Samantha Kearns, Vice Chair.
Doug Pounds.
Rich Gerald.
James Piercy.
Allison DeCesare.
Okay, so we're going to start with the minutes, approval of minutes, which are all online. Danielle directed us all to those through the email. We have three sets, the regular meeting, the 2025 public hearing, and then another regular meeting from April. Can I have a motion?
Can I move
If you can do
all
me
of them
to,
at
you can
once?
bundle them or do them one at a time.
I move we approve them all. From what I remember, they looked fine.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, any discussion or adjustments or corrections? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of those minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions?
I'm gonna
Oh,
abstain.
Jack's
I'm
gonna
not
abstain,
sure.
Richard's gonna abstain.
Not sure if I was
okay.
at all of them as a rep.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. So that is the end of that.
Quick question.
Yes?
In previous budget committee meetings, we have done a hand vote so that we can count and see who approves and who is in favor and who is not in favor.
Oh, sorry.
And for our handy, our spreadsheet here.
Yes, I will remember to do a hand vote.
Okay, I guess, was there anybody who abstained?
Yeah,
Or,
Jack.
well, two people abstained, but is there anybody who wasn't in favor? Okay, cool.
All right. I do not see, we do not have public comment on the agenda, but I'm going to open it to public comment just in case. Is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing none, I will close public comment. Okay, moving right on, new business. We're going to have a brief report from our CIP rep, Olivia.
Okay, so you wanted just the big stuff farther out, right?
Yeah, so what I asked Olivia to just give us a very quick update on is not the year, not everything that's in the coming year's CIP. We're going to learn about that over the course of the budget season. But I want to know, like, what are the big things on the horizon, like 2 years out, 3 years out, 5 years out, that we're talking about that we might need to just keep in mind as we move forward?
Okay, so as far as the immediate years go and stuff, it's a lot of kind of staggered spending. I feel like the department heads really heard us in on needing to keep costs down and spreading those out instead of slamming the taxpayers with big things. That said, some things are just getting way more expensive, like the fire trucks. So when they're on a line, you know, they're starting at over $1 million now versus lower than that. So I think it's important for us and the public to remember that they are on a matrix to keep them in working order. GPD has a new station still listed on the matrix for 2030. That's not a set in stone kind of thing, but just keeping it on there, reminding us and everyone else that it is a need and kind of sorting out when that's more practical. So that's listed at 31 million. DPW has the road plan, which is consistently expensive. Parks and Rec, a few years out, has the maintenance for the sports complex, so that's around $1 million, 2 years in a row. MVMS has the parking lot in 28-29, that's about $1.25 million. GHS was the only other school with a big project, and that was a theater addition in 2030 for $1 million. The other big thing for the school district is the potential of rebuilding a new school building. So that's listed on the matrix as a municipal lease and purchase to bond, where it would be $880,000 a year starting in 29-30. The same kind of setup for lighting and heating also, but that's a lower annual with the 262,000 a year. I think Scott had explained that to stay on top of the heating and lighting.
Okay. So we're really looking, the big things are the potential police station and a potential school.
Those are the big ones, yeah.
And they're 5 years out, which is why they're both slotted for the same year, because we
Yeah.
know that won't.
So kind of in
That
the
won't be the
meantime,
case.
right, in the meantime, both are trying to maintain and keep the buildings we do have working. So things, I know you don't want to go into what's happening soon, but things like the locker room for GPD are on the matrix sooner, so that what they have right now is usable for the team they have right now. Because both the district and the police department have recognized that we don't know when and if we'll be building new.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Olivia? So it is also worth noting that the fire trucks, if we continue to support those capital reserve funds, the fire trucks will not have an impact when we buy
Right.
them, no matter.
Yeah, yeah, so some of the things, when we're looking at it through the year is to remember that some stuff is coming from, CRF funds and other, there's,
Impact fees.
yeah, there's, the departments, especially DPW and, I'm blanking on which other one, maybe the school district was really good, oh, library, with finding grant money to help offset too.
Okay, great. All right, any other questions before we move on? James?
Olivia, did they have do you today have a understanding of what is currently funded out of the CRF versus what we have to make money or get the money for?
Do you mean like the specific line?
Just with everything you covered, I mean, is
Yeah, I mean,
percentage-wise?
you're welcome to look at it. On the CIP matrix, there's a column that lists what the funding source is. So it says if it's from tax appropriation or from CRF. And then it also has the lines to deposit into the CRF fund, so that's an annual amount as well.
We will be getting a copy of the CIP matrix in our binders when we officially start our deliberations, so we can dive in then. Any other questions? Okay. Road plan, let's have Adam Jacobs come up. So we wanted to, as we all know, I'm sure we've all been following what's been going on this year, the road plan, it was controversial when we cut it. It has been controversial all the way through and has continued to be controversial this year. So we thought it would be good if outside of our regular deliberations, because we're dealing with so many things when we're in our deliberations, that we spend some time really going over the road plan and making sure that we understand it and give Adam all the time he needs. And I hope to God he's not going to go through that enormous binder he just put on the table. So I will turn it over to Adam.
Great. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the committee for inviting me in early, because I guess, as we all know, it did get to the 11th hour, and we were still discussing road plans. So it'd be good to have at least the bare bones of what it is and kind of what it's not as well, for you folks as you hear other proposals throughout the season. So just going to dive right in as if you haven't heard me give any kind of spiel before. Some of you probably have, some of you haven't. So hopefully everybody can follow right along. Page one, just some generic numbers, or page two, I guess, as you flip over. Some generic numbers about the state of Goffstown's road. We have approximately, in Public Works, we like to count lane miles because we count how many times we have to plow. And so 1 mile of road is really two passes with the plow. So we have about 260 lane miles of roadway. It's roughly equivalent to 130 center line miles. That takes into account some of the areas in town that have a center turn lane, like Mass Road in Pinardville. Some roads are narrower than others, some are wider. But roughly, if you make an equivalent of a 24-foot road, we've got about 130 center line miles of roadway. We have 560 individual street segments, and that usually goes from intersection to intersection, which helps us, and also the state requires us to report it that way because they like to put everything into GIS mapping, and it's easier to do a node-to-node report. And for our inspections, it's easy for us to have interns go out and say from this intersection to that intersection, doing a dual road inspection. And then when we put all of our information back into our mapping, that helps as well. So this comes into play, and maybe later on in the process, if anybody wants additional information, or if you want to go on the DPW's website, we have some rankings of the roads from the last set of inspections. And those are all listed by street segment. So you might see Shirley Hill Road pop up 5 times because there's 5 different segments or more of Shirley Hill Road. So that's kind of the reason why you might see the same road pop up multiple times. Some sections of a road are in good shape, and some sections may be in bad shape depending on how the road plan has been in the past. We maintain most every street that everybody travels except the areas of 114 and 13 outside the urban compact zones. So if you blink, you'll miss them, but there's tiny little signs as you enter what's called the urban compact, and that's in the village area in Goffstown. So as you come in 114 from the Bedford side, the state maintains 114 all the way from Bedford, all the way past the county complex, and all the way basically right to the Park Ave here, near the back, the side entrance of the high school. So we pick up maintenance there, carry it through the village, and then on the far side of town, as you head towards Ware, New Boston, our urban compact line stops at the cemetery on North Mass Street, so everything beyond that is state maintained. And then the only other section that the state maintains in town is 13 outside the urban compact. Compact lines are a little bit tougher on 13, but if you go out New Boston Road, starts as Pleasant Street, before you get to the restaurant and the Grasshoppers, it's about a half-mile shy of that is where the state picks up maintenance, and they carry that all the way out to the town line. And then on 13, as it heads up High Street, we maintain all the way up into Normand Road, the crossover road there before you get up to the farms. We do not maintain private roads or Class 6 roads, which are formerly publicly maintained streets that have lapsed into unmaintained status for one reason or another. We also have a handful of gravel roads and old farm roads that we do maintain. A lot of them had gone to town meeting to be voted on. So when that happened, they become officially a town road if the town votes to maintain them. So we've got a few of those left. We've got 13 and a half miles of sidewalk, sort of adding a little every couple of years. We have a project or two that will add a little bit of sidewalk as we try to improve pedestrian mobility. We have 18 bridges, coming up on 500,000 feet of drainage pipe, and then thousands of drainage structures and manholes that go with that. Our 2025 budget for both reclaim and the resurfacing lines is $1.65 million, as approved by the voters this year. My proposal for 2026, not to steal the thunder of the CIP report to follow, I'm asking for about increase of about $650,000, which is similar to my ask at the beginning of the process last year, and that was kind of whittled down as we went. That will make up for the amount that was removed from the budget, plus the inflationary effects of the last couple of years. The general categories of the road, we have 3.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Do you mind is it okay if we stop every little bit and I let people ask? And I do have a quick question for you, and then I want to see if anybody else has a question. So this balance between reclaiming and resurfacing there's got to be a percentage split, right? Some of it's resurfacing, some of it's reclaiming. Is there a split that you're going for? Like, do you say my goal is to do whatever, a 40-60 split or whatever it may be? Or does it just kind of turn out to be whatever it turns out to be?
If you'll let me get to the
Oh,
end,
sorry.
I've got a little bit of discussion about the financials of how each type of maintenance affects the budget.
Okay.
That might help answer the question.
Okay.
A lot of it's kind of budget driven and sort of,
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about the road, what we've gone over so far?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So next slide, general categories of roads. We've got the 3 kind of groups here, the arterials or mains, sometimes we call them. The planning board defines those in the planning regs as anything over 5,000 average daily trips. So obviously some days are higher traveled than others, but over the average course of a year, these main roads that you see there are over 5,000 cars per day. Then the next category down is local and collector roads, so things like New Hampshire 13 is a little quieter than 114, Tyrrell Hill, Tibbetts, Blackbrook, Montalona, Addison, those types of collector roads that, people from the neighborhoods eventually get to on their way to wherever they're going. And then the third category is low volume, so that's the neighborhood streets. Can be dead ends, maybe not, but anywhere from 0 to 150 vehicles a day. As we've, I guess I'll jump to the next slide, I'll talk about those kind of classes in a second. What makes up a flexible pavement road? So a flexible pavement road is an asphalt paved road. You see in the south sometimes they've gone to concrete roads. That doesn't work in the northeast with the freeze-thaw cycle and the salt that we have to use to get the ice to either melt or not stick in the first place. And we need roads that can survive and be a little bit flexible with the freeze-thaw cycle below. So as the road kind of heaves, we want the pavement to rise and fall with the base material rather than just crack, which concrete would do. And so a typical flexible pavement asphalt pavement road is made up of 4 inches for us nominally of asphalt, a inch and a half of wearing course, which is a smaller aggregate size. The rock that's in the asphalt is smaller, so it's smoother, quieter, better on the vehicles, lets less water in. And then 2.5 inches of an asphalt base course, which is a heavier stone, a larger stone in it, and it provides more of the strength of the roadway, so we don't get as rutting as much as you would if everything was a small, sand or pea size. Below that, we've got a base layer of gravel. So ideally, that's a well-draining gravel, crushed gravel material. Ideally, 12 inches. This is kind of the ideal road. Every road in town is different, but well-draining, so it's not silty or clay material, which would hold water. If it holds water, is the enemy of the road. So if it holds the water, that's going to expand when it comes time to freeze, and then contract when it thaws again. And that's what's going to cause your pavement distresses. And as soon as you start to get a distress at the top of the pavement, water can get in and accelerate the process. So that base layer plus the asphalt layers are what's called the bound layers. And they're bound because the asphalt, the base layer of asphalt is placed upon the gravel, and it creates an actual bond with the gravel material. It gets embedded into the bottom of the base asphalt, and the top course of asphalt is bonded to the base course of asphalt. So that kind of moves as a unit. Below that is what's called unbound layers. So where you have gravel against gravel, they can move. You can get some migration of fines, so the smaller sand might go from layer to layer, or as water comes in and saturates the road maybe in the high groundwater times of the year, and then recedes, you might get some loss of fines from that good base gravel that we have that we want to add and keep in our roads. I've got a little arrow there off to the right, optional geotextile fabric. A lot of times with our older roads, which may have been gravel and then maybe some macadam, some oil, over the years they were sort of, they advanced into a paved state. They do have suboptimal gravels underneath. Several decades ago, I guess now, they've developed these geotextile fabrics, woven fabrics that can be placed on a suboptimal type of gravel, put a little bit more gravel on top of it, but it will actually break up those 2 layers, and it helps to wick water out if water gets under the base of the roadway, but also prevents that migration of fines from one layer to another. And they do find that overall, if you're going to put gravel on a road, maybe it's a road that has a dip in it, where an old marsh was or where an old stream crossing was that was paved over long ago, that area might heave all the time because the groundwater table comes up. If you have that geotextile and then a nice layer of gravel on top, it saves you several inches of gravel. You can put less gravel on top if you have that extra layer. So sometimes when we do a longer, not so much in a Pinardville or in the village, but if Montalona Road, Addison Road type of thing, those have fabrics underneath them now to help that differential settlement. And then below that, the unbound layers, you have sub-base, which would be maybe a bigger, heavier 3-inch gravel, and then subgrade, which is whatever was there to begin with when they built the road. As I mentioned, water is the road's worst enemy. That's why they're called highways. It used to be the highest way to get from point A to B or whatever. It was up out of the water, so the water would shed off to the sides. If you look at the cross-section of an old Roman road, it's not all that different from what we're trying to establish now, is a well-draining layer with something on top to be able to drive on, and then a crown in the road to shed water off the road. So if a raindrop falls in the center of the road, it should shut off to one side or the other, and then a way to get water out and away from the edges of the road, because otherwise it'll soak in, and just like your house, when it comes off the roof, you don't want water in the basement foundation. We want to get water either away or collected as soon as possible once it gets off the pavement. So a couple ways to do that, controlling the water. Once you have that pitch, if we're off in an area, some of these collector roads where we're not, in an urbanized area, we have a lot of ditch lines. Some healthier than others, but the idea is as fast as we can get water into those ditches and then carry it to the eventual outfall, which normally is wherever water used to go before the roads existed, a stream course or a drainage path through the woods, a pond, a stream, that kind of thing. More in the village areas or Pinardville, we have closed drainage systems. Usually with curb, but not always with curb. And those, you can tell when you see drainage structures in the road, either a drainage grate, like you see in the yellow on the right side of this drawing, or manholes. That's indicative of either stormwater or sewer, sanitary sewer under the road. Usually if we have sewer, we have drainage in that area. But a lot of times we'll have drainage with no sewer just because of their surface area. So we have a way through these inlets to catch surface water if we don't have an ability to have a ditch line and a way to send the water away. So we'll catch the water along the curb line, and it will eventually find a drain inlet and go into the drainage system. Or we are preventing water from coming in from the sides of the road or from the embankment sometimes, where the road is cut out of an embankment and water just comes in from every angle. We want to catch that groundwater and lower the groundwater table under the road. So on a lot of our streets and almost all of our reclaim projects, we'll put either perforated drainage pipe or special smaller under drain pipe, whose only job is to catch groundwater and direct it away from the road base. Both of those things, both catching the surface water and catching the groundwater, extend the life of the pavement and make sure that we don't have to go back in 5 years after a bunch of freeze thaws happen and ruin the road again. So on the right side there, you kind of see the generic idea of a closed drainage system. There's a way to get water in. There's pipes that may, or not all structures have an inlet and an outlet, but they all have outlets unless they're leaching basins. We do, or dry wells, you might hear that term. We have a few spots in town where we just don't have a fully flushed out drainage system. And to ease maybe a localized ponding in the past, we put a single dry well somewhere. And that sometimes is enough. If you can catch a couple 100 gallons of water, prevents it from going down a couple driveways or being a pond right in the roadway. Sometimes that's good enough. Over time, those become less effective, and they're only effective for that first flush, that first half hour of rain. After that, they're full, and now it's backing up back onto the road. You probably will hear from the library about one such structure in their parking lot. That's a dry well, just as a structure in the ground, like Swiss cheese, has a bunch of holes. It fills up, and then if the groundwater table is low enough, it will leach water out. But if the groundwater is high, or if it's just too much rain, it will just fill up, and the parking lot is full before the structure has a chance to drain down again. So anyway, this picture's got an inlet and an outlet pipe, and then we have catch basins strategically throughout to make sure that all the junk that we catch every time it rains that comes off the roadways, a lot of oils, trash, contaminants, pet debris, that kind of thing. We want a way to trap that in a catch basin, so that you see the bottom of this little square thing on the drawing is a cutaway of a catch basin. And that's called a sump. So it allows anything big in the water to settle down in the bottom of the sump, and in theory, the water that's spilling out into the out pipe is a little cleaner than the water that came in either from the street or from the inlet pipe. So every so often, we try to get a third of the town roughly a year. Belmore Catch Basin Service right now has our contract. They'll come through, and they have we used to have a Vector, but it died and we didn't replace it. They will suck out the catch basin sumps to make sure that we have room for more sediment to trap in there. So that keeps both the contaminants and the sediment from getting downstream, which almost always is some sort of water body. So that's how part of the program that we have to maintain the water quality in town and all the lakes and streams is achieved. We'll have a catch basin or several in one drainage line to catch all this. Okay, and then one thing they don't show is in some of the areas, especially around Glen Lake, we have a couple of baffles. So sediments can fall out, but then oils, which will ride the top surface of the water, when they get to the outfall pipe, a baffle will prevent the oil from getting in. So it kind of traps from below and from above the very top surface, and that helps keep the oils out of the lake. But that's kind of an ongoing effort. When there's a big heavy storm, all bets are off. The whole, everything flushes through. But someday I'll give you another presentation about the MS4 program, which is all our stormwater and water quality stuff that kind of goes along with all this. But for this exercise, it's mainly roads. All right, next slide, I've got kind of just a cutaway of a road. This will be more indicative of maybe the village area, definitely Pinardville, where you've got multiple other users of the right-of-way. This doesn't show any overhead lines, but those always come into play too. In some cases, we've got 2, some cases 3 utility poles side by side where the utilities are swapping over and taking their sweet time to get everything moved over. So we deal with that, but for the most part, the stuff that we worry about is what's underground. So certainly any sewer, water, gas lines, buried electrical lines, they're kind of all over. So when we start getting into the cost per mile of certain treatments, especially in a rebuild project where we might be either replacing or adding completely new drainage for a neighborhood in Pinardville that doesn't currently have it, a lot of times we're the last to the party if we don't have drainage in it already. So now we've got to work around not just these mains, but all the service lines for gas, sewer, water, maybe electrical cable that go to each of these houses. They're all at different elevations, so a lot of our work ahead of time is to kind of on the computers through CAD chart out where the best route for our new pipes or replacement pipes is going to go, and which one it's going to go over and which under, that kind of thing. So it's kind of a 3D Jenga sort of setup, but needless to say, there's a lot going on under the ground, and we try not to accidentally find any of them. Okay, moving on. Next, we've got some general categories of road maintenance. I went from most expensive and kind of biggest ticket, highest visibility stuff to the least. So the most expensive stuff that we do in town, it would be what we call a reclaim project. We don't build a lot of brand new road segments. If we do, it's a very, very short segment, maybe just a turnaround or a 100-foot extension of a road here or there. But the town in general does not build brand new roads. Usually that's a developer of some kind, and then they'll turn it over to the town, or not. Sometimes there'll be a private road forever. But sometimes the planning board will require them to build it to town standards and then turn it over. So normally if we're involved, it's a rebuild of a road that was built decades ago. These are failed or poor roads. Generally, at this point, any road that we're fully rebuilding is fully into that failed status. Either, it's about as bad as it's going to get, or close to. So this type of work includes both surface and subsurface drainage work. When that's done, grinding, chewing up the existing pavement, and turning that into part of the base gravel. So as we talked about back at the beginning, we've got that engineered gravel that ideally you have underneath the asphalt. A lot of these projects, almost all of these reclaim projects, they're so named because the machine that comes in and chews the pavement up is called a reclaimer. It totally reclaims the road. So it grinds up the asphalt and pounds it down in, and it mixes up the first couple inches to a foot of gravel with this pavement now, and it's sort of a stabilized, engineered material. We have it sampled, and we know how to get full compaction, that kind of thing, and it makes a nice tight base material, which is also still well draining because it's relatively clean, and the gravels that run underneath the road to begin with hopefully are in good shape. And then we pave on top of that. So a lot of times with the reclaim projects, you will get an eventual increase in the road height. If it's going to be a detriment to a residence or two or several, sometimes we'll have to either what's called box out, which would be fully excavate a certain section of road to bring the level down so then it can come back up, or sometimes when it comes time to grade the road after it's chewed up, we'll use the grader and pull down to a certain level. We try not to make huge changes in road elevations if we can, because it's the more we change the height of the road, the more we have to change driveways to match and all that. But in general, we want the road to be the highest point around, so it keeps that water shutting off. as Laurel Street in particular found this year, as time goes on and that road falls apart and settles, it tends to become the lowest point. So now all of a sudden everybody's yards and the road itself drain to either the center of the road or maybe ruts that go up both sides of the road. And now water collects from the top of a hill all the way to the bottom before it has a chance to run off. If we come back and we crown the road and do nothing else, now we're sending water places that it hasn't run in decades, and we'll get some unhappy campers. So it's kind of a process. We have to make sure we do drainage at the same time as a rebuild on these bigger projects. But they do become expensive. In particular, if we were to contract, when we've contracted in the past, it's quite a multiplier, and I'll show you that coming up, how much more expensive it is if we contract out fully. The town's got a pretty capable crew, so we do almost all the drainage and general contracting type site work. We hire people for the actual paving of the roadway itself, and if there's asphalt berm. If there's granite curbing involved, we hire a contractor for that. That's really it for the most part. The rest of the work is, if we can, town forces. So the next category down, a little bit less expensive.
Can we stop for a second here?
Yep.
Doug got a question?
Yes, Madam Chair. Yeah, just if it's possible, Adam, could you just give us like the average cost per mile for these categories? Do you
Read
have
my
any
mind.
thoughts on that?
Just skip ahead a couple slides.
Okay, all right. If you got that coming, that's okay. I'll hold
Yep.
on.
I like it. I like to be able to put a check next to my questions here. That's good. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version while we're here on this slide. So 2025 cost per mile for a reclaim project in, say, Pinardville, about $860,000. If we were off sort of on a Montalona Road, Shirley Hill Road, less utilities underground, fewer structures that are needed for drainage, no curbing to speak of, it's about $560,000 a mile. If we're going to contract an urban section, the last time we did this is actual numbers, it was, the rate would have been $2.15 million for a mile. So we get a pretty good bang for the buck. And then this next category I'm about to talk to, overlays, maintenance overlays for an 1.5 inches of asphalt for a standard width road is about $117,000 a mile. So talking orders of magnitude when you get into a reclaim versus a paving project. So next category down would be a maintenance overlay paving. This is that category of the phrase that you probably all heard, keep your good roads good. For this, we try to target 1.5 inches, but lately we've been trying to stretch the dollars a little bit and gone down to 1 inch. That's paving over an existing roadway surface that's not in terrible shape. And we're talking probably the 10 to 15 year window from either its first rebuild or maybe the last paving cycle. Some roads age faster than others over that same time period just based on how much drainage is involved or the quality of the gravel's poured, traffic loads. If you have 3 times the amount of cars on it and trucks on it, it ages faster, that kind of thing. Even things such as shade. So if there's a lot of solar exposure on a road, we don't have to use quite as much salt. Ice and water don't last as long on the roadway, and that creates less deterioration of that section of roadway. If you have a nice shady road, it can hold water for a long time. So for a maintenance overlay project, we don't do extensive drainage work, but in addition to the actual overlay of the asphalt, we'll do a little bit of drainage work, such as if we have a culvert, which is a cross pipe. So a culvert would be a pipe that maybe is where an old river or stream was. Somebody put a bridge if it was big enough, or a culvert pipe if it was small enough, and it just daylights on both sides of the road. You could look right down it. You could get off the side of the road and look right up the pipe, hopefully. So that'd be a culvert pipe. Not to be confused with a ditch line or a swale, which is on the sides of the road, those kind of U-shaped things that are, if you go off the road and end up in the ditch. And then not to be confused with actual drainage pipes for a closed drainage system, which you can't see in and out of the ends of, except if you're at the very last piece of pipe in the run, where it spills out into the lake or the river. So anyway, for a maintenance overlay project, we'll go through if there's any culverts that are ancient, or there was a good period of time where the material du jour was a corrugated metal pipe, which basically is all rusted out now. Its life cycle is over. Now, for almost predominantly plastic piping, which has a longer lifespan. Some roads and bigger structures might be concrete. But we're in the course of time, we're trying to get rid of all the old metal pipe because it is, it does corrode, obviously, and turn into less of a structural issue. So we get sinkholes. You might high-profile sinkhole type location this year. It was actually last year, but we finished replacing some of the pipe that was soon to go. Center Street, right at the bottom of Tibbetts Hill, we had some sinkholes developed last year. We were able to get some of the pipes replaced before school went back in session, and then I wanted to keep my job, so we said we'll do the rest of the pipes next year when school's out. So we went back and did a couple of the other pipes that connect to that same system, but they're all the same vintage, so they were all right on the verge of collapse. Sometimes we get to these pipes and the pipe is gone, but the material around it had been in the same shape for so long that it's sort of created like an earthen arch column sort of thing through the ground, but there's no pipe left, or barely any pipe left. And that's a dangerous place to be, obviously, because they can go pretty quickly. So we'll do those cross culverts. We'll tune up the ditch lines. We'll dig them back down so they're deep enough to get water off and away from the roadbed. Maybe put a few new inlet structures here and there if there are some spots that might need drainage that don't have any other options. And then shoulder gravel. Basically, any project that adds height to the asphalt at the end, one of the last things we have to do is add shoulder support, shoulder gravel. At the edge of pavement, so the first time somebody drives off the road, they don't start breaking the new pavement up. And also for safety of those. If you depart the roadway, that's one of the easiest ways to crash, is if you have a nice drop off and you kind of lose control. So we try to get that shoulder gravel in as soon as possible. It is a process, but kind of has to be done to protect that investment. And then if there's any granite curbing that might need to be reset, if it's in the village area or Pinardville, or if there's asphalt berm and maybe it's been, so the asphalt berm is curb but just made of asphalt and it's kind of got that slope to it. You might hear the phrase Cape Cod curbing. It's kind of the same thing. Keeps the road edge from washing away, and it works if you have places to send the water. The water hits the berm and goes downhill. But if a road has been paved once or twice, for maintenance overlay purposes, since that curbing or berm was put in, you start to lose what's called reveal on the curb. So the curb starts to look sort of pretty tiny. And now if you get a 2-inch rainstorm and a crazy storm, it can overtop the curbing. So sometimes if it's the second or sometimes the third road has been paved, we'll grind off the old asphalt berm and put new berm on before the top is paved. Kind of the next category down, a little bit less expensive, but we get less bang for our buck here, would be a Band-Aid shim or a riding surface is what the DOT has started calling it. Trying to get at least a level of safety and user pleasure, I guess, out of the roadway if we don't have the time to get to a full rebuild project or the money, but the road is either failed or almost failed. If there's any kind of accident history, we don't usually get to that point where we're really having accidents, but you start to see hubcaps or complaint volumes come up, or we have to go back and patch 3 or 4 times a year because the road base is so saturated, the patch just keeps popping out. So some of these areas, trouble spots, if we have no other option, we'll spend some money, we'll put a layer of asphalt on it. Roby Road, I guess, is a good example. Norman Road a few years ago got a shim. There's no real drainage work to speak of. It was just an overlay to buy us some time. So these roads that we've shimmed, you can start to see reflective cracking, usually the first freeze-thaw cycle, and then that cycle begins again, and you start to deteriorate. And it's usually the same 4 or 5 spots that always blow out, because the sub-base material is so wet. But it buys us some time to either get the budget or whatever else needs to happen. Sometimes there's a section of road which, throwing out examples, but maybe there's sidewalk, or maybe we're going for a grant to do X, or the school wants to do Y, or this business might be moving in, and we want to buy some time until the real decisions need to be made, or whatever. Sometimes this is a good thing that you can do in the interim to get that riding surface back. Often we won't do much other than the paving and the shoulder gravel, but sometimes if we have a culvert that is like those that are in danger of a sinkhole or a total loss, nobody wants to look bad. And even if it's just a Band-Aid shim paving job, we don't want to have to be out there cutting into the road year 1 or year 2 because there's a big sinkhole. So if there's a really bad culvert, we'll replace it. But other than that, usually the idea here is low time input and low money input on our part to get by a few more years. And then the very last,
We're coming up on 30 minutes, so
Okay.
if we can kind of
How-
move
how long you wanna
into
go?
the plan
keep
itself,
there's no.
that'd be great. And
There's
Peter
no
had a
plan.
question?
Oh, go ahead.
It might be answered later on, but like what percentage of your work typically are these different types? Like what percentage of your work is riding surface, Band-Aids versus maintenance overlay and
I'll
reclaim?
give you a little bit more info in a sec, if
Okay.
that works for you.
Perfect.
And there's no real stock answer, it's kind of sometimes what's dictated by budget or others. The last thing I got on this page, mill and fill repair. So if we've got small sections of road that might be failing faster than others, we'll come in, we'll use a milling machine, grind out big square rectangular areas, pave a patch back in. That'll usually last longer than a pothole patch, but not quite as good as a full surface paving. All right, cost of deferred maintenance, you probably have seen this slide quite a bit. Basically, this just shows that, for a 25-year life cycle of a road, you get the biggest drop in quality in the first 15 years or so. The degradation curve here gets pretty steep around year 10 to 15. So if you don't do a preventative action to sort of increase the quality of that road back up, you get a very rapid loss in quality. I guess I'll leave that alone. We'll get to other things here. Road plan history, modern road plan as we know it, basically about 2002 timeframe after several years of deferred maintenance. Initially, it was funded pretty healthily. Funding peaked in 2009 at just over $2.5 million in 2009 dollars. There was a 58% cut in 2012 as kind of coming off the housing crisis and all that happened and municipal revenues were declining from the state, et cetera. As the years went on and the budget was built slowly back up over a number of years, we started to focus on main and collector roads, get the most bang for the most buck, more drivers per day kind of thing. Budget last few years remained level until 2025. We had that 20% cut, we all know. There's also been the other effect of significant inflation since 2008 and then a pretty significant spike in 2021. I'll show you that in a second. And then the last thing I had to note is the select board made some decisions to unfund a few things to fund the Laurel Street Reclamation Project this year. It wasn't originally in my road plan that they had approved, but they made some things work and changed a few other budgeted areas to make that happen. But initially, to answer some of your questions, my plan that I presented to the board and they originally approved in April was 0 reclamation projects this year, just with the reduced budget. I'm kind of going to why here in a minute. Next graph, the chart is just showing from 2008 on what actual road plan funding has been, non-inflated dollars. So this is just whatever the dollars were for that particular year. And the sources of that money. You can see that big drop off there in the aughts, or late aughts. This does also include, or this funding includes $450,000 in offsetting revenue in the last couple of years for the highway block grant. And that highway block grant funding through the state of New Hampshire, and a lot of that's federal pass-through dollars, varies year to year, but that's currently what we anticipate and what was just announced for this upcoming fiscal year is $450,000. So of the, just the 1.6 million, 450,000 of that is offset by revenues from the state. So taxpayers locally, at least through their local taxes, are only funding the 1.15. The next page is basically that same information in the light blue, but then if you adjust for inflation, the dark blue would show you what we would have to be funding our road plan at per year in order to do as much road as we did in 2009 or 2008. So any delta between the dark blue and the light blue, back to calculus, that old area under the curve type thing, that's our accumulated road plan funding gap versus what had the original intent of the program had been back in 2008. And you can see as that inflation spiked there in 21, 22 and beyond, it's a pretty healthy amount of money that we're shorter towards the roads than we were back then. Next page, just kind of back to those numbers I gave you earlier, but it shows you the cost in 2016 versus actual cost in 25 for each of the main types of maintenance activities we do or rebuild activities and how much service life that puts back into a roadway. So service life is starting to become a more popular way to talk about road network degradation and how to fund it and where to put your dollars. You can see if you rebuild a road or if you have a new road, the expected life of that road is 25 years. Obviously, you don't want to get to the 0 years of remaining life because then it's almost completely unusable and you have a line out the door of people asking you to repave it. But that's how much it would put back in. And then an overlay only adds 11 years because you're not addressing some of those other factors that lead to the road falling apart. So the last two slides talk about remaining service life and the network analysis. So if you've got a new road, expected to have a service life of 25 years. Each road in town ages 1 year per year. So if we have 130 miles of road, we lose 130 mile years of service life, network-wide, in 1 year. The whole goal is to put service life back into the road network. Maintenance projects do that. So that reclaim adds 25 years, and that's, if you do a mile of reclaim, you just added 25 mile years of service life back in. The goal should be to either maintain status quo if we like our overall road network quality, or to add service life into the network, add more than we lose. We know we're losing 100 mile years a year, so we should, or 130 mile years a year, so we should be trying to add in 130 plus mile years of service life. If we took our entire $1.65 million budget this year and spent them on reclaim, we only inject about 2 mile years, I'm sorry, it should be 2 miles worth of projects being done. And the next slide, I'll show you what that actually comes out to be. Sorry. So if we make those two assumptions, we lose 130 mile years of service life each year. And if we assume that we add 25 for a reclaim project or 11 years per mile on an overlay project, if I gave the select board a few different versions of this, but to take the extremes, the worst first approach spends that full budget on reclaim. We can, for our budget, we could get about 2 miles of reclaim done. We're injecting 50 total mile years of service life. So 2 miles, and then you get 25 years of life for each of those miles. Our overall network has aged 80 mile years because we lose 130 for our 130 miles worth of road, but we only added back in 50. So that's a bad, worst first. That highlights why you can't do that. All you do there is chase the lowest quality of your roads. Maintenance only approach on the kind of the other end of the spectrum. If you spent the entire budget on overlay projects only, we could get about 14 miles done. That injects 154 mile years of service life, 14 miles at 11 years of life for each of those miles. Overall, the network gains 34 mile years, so we're going in the right direction. We have better overall quality roads than we had when we started that year. But the problem with that is we haven't done any reclamation projects, so no failed streets have been improved. So we have that contingent of residents is still just as upset, if not more, than they were the previous year. And we've now added to our list of failed streets by some number. So each year we have some number of roads that slide from the okay status to the poor or the failed status, because every single road is getting a year older. Under current budget scenario, we aren't in a place, we don't have all our roads in a good enough condition to say let's spend everything we have on maintenance only. But if we start to work in any rebuild projects, we go negative. So that's what happened this year. I had 3 different options for the board. The only option that actually came close to a status quo was no reclamation projects whatsoever and spend everything on just keeping our good roads good, overlay projects. So the idea is we need to fund at a level in which we can at least chip away. The board has pledged that regardless of the budget scenario, and Richard, correct me if I'm speaking that, anything that the board didn't kind of vocalize, they indicated they want to tackle at least one reclamation project every year, regardless of the budget level. They don't want to have to tell residents year after year after year your road isn't getting touched. So with that caveat, that significantly shrinks. Even if a road's a quarter mile, it's still hundreds of thousands of dollars to do a reclamation project. And now that's hundreds of thousands of dollars you have less for those maintenance overlays. So pretty quickly you start to go red again with with the inability to keep up. So you're losing more life in your network than you're adding back in every year. There are, if you get to a good enough place, and eventually, I know Elizabeth's asked me in the past, when are we going to be at a place where we can just be maintaining all of our roads? Right now, that answer is like, well, every single one of us will be dead, and our kids probably will be dead, because we're not getting to the failed roads, and at this rate, we just can't, fast enough to get them all gone. We've got a backlog of decades at this point, at the current rate, because we're adding to that list of failed roads every year if we don't maintain them as well.
So I think some of us have questions, Adam. Thank you. First of all, thank you. That was a very full presentation. Can we go back to that slide about general categories of roads? We've got arterial, local, and low volume.
Yes.
So I'm still trying to I'm trying to wrap my head around the problem about the status of the town, so to speak. So what, of those arterial roads, I guess it's not enough to just say that they've been reclaimed, but are any of those, have all of those arterial roads been reclaimed?
Short of a couple small sections, for the most part, yes, because there was such an emphasis, last 15 years leading up to the last couple on those main and collector roads. We don't have much of a backlog, and we've been able to pretty much, and I have more information too for future meetings, probably to give, if there's curiosity anyway, how well are we keeping up? So we rebuild a road, okay, now it's fast forward 10, 12, 15 years, how many of those reclaimed roads have already been overlaid? Are we keeping on track with our maintaining of our asset? Coming into this year for our main and collector roads, we only had less than half a dozen that were overdue, which we were calling anything that had gone at least 10 years without being repaved. So Montalona was one that was just taken care of. Mountain Road, that's being finished this year, so that'll be off the list. Page Hill Road, believe it or not, it's been 10 years for some of that. Shirley Hill Upper Loop, some of that's on track for this year. Tibbetts, Addison, East Dunbarton. So we've done a pretty good job collectively keeping up with the mains.
But you're saying those roads, they need maintenance, but they don't need to be reclaimed.
Correct. So
Okay, so all the arterial roads at this point are in a maintenance-only pattern.
yes, yep. Short, a few little sections here and there for whatever reason, but for the most part, yes, we're not worried about, our list of to be reclaimed do not include our heaviest travel roads.
So what about on that local, which must be I would imagine that's a big percentage of roads, is in those local roads?
Pretty long list, and it's not just an item on a it's not just a single line on a list. There may be 2 miles between intersections on certain road, so the actual amount of asphalt is pretty voluminous in some of these cases. But like Norman Road, for example, hasn't been reclaimed with full drainage. It's got some crazy ditch lines, some eroding embankments, that sort of stuff. That got that Band-Aid shim in 2018, I think, 2019. So we're kind of coming to the decision point soon with Norman Road about what we're going to do there, as an example. But I keep main and collector in that same category, so we've done a overall pretty good job. There are a few that do need to be reclaimed, but in general, those top 2 categories are in good shape.
Oh,
As
so
long as we keep-
even the local roads there's some that need to be reclaimed, but not very many? Most of them are
Correct.
also in a maintenance position?
Yeah, we've done a pretty good job getting there. The problem is the neighborhood streets are, we're just scratching the surface
Okay.
on those. And
How many miles of neighborhood roads do we have?
I would have to run a report to break it out that way. I'm not sure, but it's like, I don't know if linked is the best way to talk about it, but
Yeah, I guess I would say it's like, which of these pieces of the pie is the biggest? Like, obviously, there might be, like, arterial main roads, you only have like 8 listed, but they are, those are.
they're long.
I know all those roads, right? Whereas
Right.
like low-volume roads, you're gonna name a road that I've never heard of before, because why would I go to that side of town, right? Like, because I don't know anyone there or whatever.
I'd have to pull.
But I feel like they're a larger
I'll pull
piece
a
of the
report
pie.
for you, because I don't want to give bad info. My sense is it's almost half neighborhood street links versus
Yeah.
main road links, but. I can
So,
get that-
and
I can
Laurel
get that
Street
for
was
you.
a neighborhood road?
Yes, yep.
Okay. Olivia?
So with the low-volume neighborhood roads, what's the cost impact or the cost difference of, having it on a maintenance program where we are able to get to those roads versus having to deal with emergent things, like say Plummer Street? Just because I'm on there, so I know that there was the situation earlier. Or Laurel Street where it gets to the point where it's completely failed. And I mean, there's a lot more in the Pinardville area like that keep not getting, and people are getting water in their basements and all of that. So how, is there an increased cost having to, drop everything to go to one of these streets because it's impassable?
Once they get to that fail category and they really need, once the pavement, alligator cracking is a phrase you might hear, where it literally looks like an alligator's back, where pieces of pavement are like this big, maybe a foot max, but it's the whole road is interwoven with cracks. Once it gets to that point or approaching that point, it's a reclaim project. There's no saving that road. It's also indicative that what's underneath the road is in rough enough shape. The base gravel's either not draining enough or just not a decent material. So if you just pave right over it, you'll get those cracks right back. And there's clearly not enough drainage, so it kind of necessitates that whole project. So there's that 6x multiplier for that type of fix versus a maintenance overlay.
Okay.
Roughly. And then if it's a Pinardville Street where those other utilities come in, it's a little bit more tricky. as well.
So with the drainage issues on like that side of Mass Road coming from St. A's impact Mass Road too? Because it's coming down towards there?
Yes, eventually everything has to cross
Right.
over. And most of Pinardville drains to the landfill, the
Yeah.
backside of the landfill. And yes, at some point you need to have a path from Mass Road up the hill for all these. So that's why we kind of have to sadly work for that neighborhood in particular, work up College and then work up the hill to give water a place to go. There's a few pipes on Mass Road that, as everything is built out, will probably have to be upsized. The other thing that fights us is storms have changed. So all the calculations for what a pipe, how much water a neighborhood might receive and how much goes into a pipe are old, decades old, and the rainfall maps are changing. So a 100-year storm is much more intense than a 100-year storm used to be. So some of the pipes we found were engineered 30 years ago are now undersized for the amount of water we get. So we're kind of chasing our tail a little bit with that as well. But for the most part, what we have on Mass Road is big enough to handle what we need to be adding in the short run.
Okay, thank you.
More questions?
I have two questions. One would be is how often are roads categorized into these different categories?
We have been very lucky with summer internships, so we have 2 summer interns that we hire on, and that's one of their primary tasks is asset management. So they'll do roadway inspections. We give them some training and some kind of cheat sheets about this is what a quality, we have a very basic inspection level. This is what a 10 road is, this is what a 7 road is, this is what a 3. So every summer we try to get every road that we maintain inspected and rated. And then we do other things like culvert inspections and outfalls and that kind of stuff too.
But I guess like sometimes a road might go from being a low volume road into being a
Oh,
local
I'm sorry.
collector
So from a
road.
traffic perspective.
Yeah.
So for us, it's, we don't get huge jumps in traffic volumes. Southern New Hampshire, we don't have any of our own traffic counting equipment, although I know our new We have a video detection on the intersections, the signalized intersections. So it's not, it doesn't take video and store it, but it's got a sensor that, a car goes by and it triggers the, the lights to change instead of loops under the ground. It can spit out and tell you how many cars went through that intersection from what direction throughout the day. So short of that, we don't have our own traffic counting measures, but the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission each summer has a program where they rotate around, and they try to get every couple of years each road in every town in their area counted. I say every road, every like main collector. They don't do neighborhood streets because it's, they know the volumes. But so at most, I think our data is 3 years old in a few cases, but a lot of it's a year or two old.
Okay. And then, my other question is, if the road plan on your last, not the last slide, the second to last slide, keeping in, I realize that what I'm about to ask would not happen, but if the road plan was funded all the way up to that top blue line, right? Which it wouldn't happen, 'cause, right? Would DPW have the time to fix all the roads in town?
Oh, so good question.
Like, if
So
they had all the money, could they do it?
Let's say the budget committee and the town, everybody, we
Was like, let's
won.
pay it all.
Yeah, we won Powerball collectively.
Yeah.
If, like a lot of towns bond, and that's a bad cycle to get into because now you're paying interest in addition to the roads. A lot of towns that bond find that they can't find a contractor that can take on that much work in a single season. You don't want to have all of your roads, in theory, main roads or collectors, if that was the case in some towns, at the same time, under construction. And you may not want to deal with multiple contractors. And if weather comes into play for the asphalt plants, you're stuck anyway. So those big drops of money, to your point, don't, it's not managed from having, you can't like fix everything you need to fix in a short period of time. If we, on the other side, so let's say every road in town has been reclaimed and we're in that maintenance status now where we're paying less for each road, but we're able to keep up, that's more doable. I am not sure if one paving contractor could handle that much work in one season, because that's a lot of asphalt to move as well. If we had, talking theoretically, the whole town.
Right, but I guess without a contractor, we as DPW couldn't reclaim every road in town if we had all the money to do it.
Definitely for reclaim projects, definitely not. Yeah,
Okay.
That's pretty labor intensive. And then you get into the spiral of, okay, now you contract out and it costs you
Right,
3
and it's gonna
times as
cost $2
much,
million
and,
a
it's
thing.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, so kind of two different angles, but they're both almost come to the same answer. If you were just to get this crazy amount of money, it'd be hard to spend it all in 1 year.
Allison?
But is there a sweet spot that you come to that would be more, but that would still be doable? I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's got to be something higher than where we are funding that would kind of put them at optimal that they could actually use, could logistically do in the meantime. And it's higher than what we are.
Yes. We have the capacity at times to have 3 excavation and drainage crews operating at once. Gets a little hairy with vacations and all that kind of stuff in the summer, but in theory, if we have 3 crews going, we could be on 3 separate projects. Probably 2 projects per crew per year, length of road changes, all that, but, just chalk and generic. We could get to easily 5 or 6 reclaim segments of road a year if we had the money to do it, in addition to the maintenance. But if we go all reclaim, we're falling behind, and if we go all maintenance, we get the pitchforks.
Alice, or Olivia, did you have a question?
Mine is the same as Allison.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? So the select board is committed to 1 mile of reclaimed road every year.
They'd like to
One project.
take on one
project,
reclaim,
yeah.
One
at least,
project.
a minimum of 1 reclaim project per year.
Okay, so the project could be
Right now, next year's
Big or small?
project is Ivy and Wall because they have been dropped off 2 years in a row off the list.
It was what? I didn't hear.
Ivy and Wall streets, which are right next to Laurel, they've been deferred now 2 years. And they are by rating, they're the worst roads we have, so those would be the next reclaim projects.
Was Laurel at the top of the list before all this?
Right there with Ivy and Wall, it's a little funky because Laurel is the drainage path for Ivy and Wall, so we had to do that one first, even though it was slightly better condition, but not much. Olivia can vouch for that.
All the roads.
Splitting hairs
that
there.
are kind of under St. A's Drive, going down to Mass Road with College Road right there, are all in really rough shape.
Okay.
It's like all those kind of angled streets off of Mass Road, like the
Okay.
side pizza market's on.
Okay.
I personally can't wait for the list of all the roads so we can play. Do you know where this road is?
I think it'd be so hard.
We
I
can
would
do
know.
a scavenger hunt. I can send you the worst
Yeah.
roads in town, you know?
I can score well on this game, I'm sure.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Adam, for coming in and explaining this all to us. And I feel like we got to jump on our, now you can skip this part in your presentation in the fall.
Anybody miss it first time, right? Well, certainly, if you have any questions.
Well, but now in the
along.
fall, when you come forward, you can say, this is the proposal, and you don't need to do all this background because we've already done it, and we'll understand specifically what you mean.
Sounds good. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Sorry for being long-winded, but I had an open-ended assignment, so like a goldfish, I took the room I was given. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, next up, Derek and Danielle and Doug. Do you guys want to go together or separately, or, I mean, you want to? So this is basically to talk about, if you're like me, you always hear all this stuff in the news all spring about this bill's going through the legislature and it's going to do this to your taxes, and you never really find out like what actually passed and what the truth of all that is. So I would like the committee to hear from these guys, what is the actual impact that we're looking at? Away from all the hype and the hoopla and everything else, what are we actually looking at for changes in the state budget? Because since this was the state budget year. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
I guess we can start with at least from the town's perspective. We did have a handout. We've kind of broken it down into 3 categories. Law changes or changes in the state budget that'll have an immediate impact on the town budget. That's on your first page. Law changes that may have a future impact, which is on the second page. And then on the third are issues that we continue to keep an eye on. One of the items in the budget trailer bill, so one of the hard things that we're seeing at the state level is the budget trailer bill has become the catch-all. So we are still examining and getting feedback from NHMA, which is why NHMA is so critical to us, because I invite anyone to look at the budget trailer bill and tell us everything that's in there.
Wait, can you tell me what a budget trailer bill is?
So every 2 years, the state passes a budget, and they have HB1, that is their dollar budget. And then they have a trailer bill that is all the legislation enacted to make that budget actually happen. What has happened over the years is other bills that may be retained in committee or put on the floor suddenly go into that trailer bill. And every 2 years, more and more and more and more items are going into that budget trailer bill. That's a political discussion, why it's happening up at the state, but it makes it very difficult for us as staff to kind of suss out, and that's why NHMA is so critical on the town side to help us figure out what's actually in that. But in that budget trailer bill, one of the big ones was Chapter 141. This is a new surcharge on any solid waste disposed at state active landfills. So basically, anybody that brings solid waste to any of the state's active landfills or the waste-to-energy facility, they'll have to pay $3.50 per ton. So this is a surcharge. This is a new surcharge. And so we'll be paying that. And what is written into the law will be, we will get quarterly rebates of 100%, provided we're able to prove that we paid that surcharge as part of our bill. So what you'll see is we have approximately 7,000 tons of solid waste that goes out. So, just short of $25,000 that you're gonna see on both the appropriation side. You're gonna see an increase on the appropriation side in our tipping and our bulky waste lines in DPW. But then you'll also see that same corresponding revenue side on the revenue side.
Wait.
This is gonna look awful. This is gonna look so bad on a spreadsheet.
So what is the point of
Yep.
this?
I'm sure that money
Why?
won't get lost or anything. It never has before.
It's gonna
Yeah.
be impossible to prove that you
I have an idea.
Well,
Ridiculous.
And it has to be itemized on the bill, which is something that we have to pay close attention to, and we have to make sure that the vendor is capturing as well, so.
all right. Take your shot, Jack, and then I want to hear what it actually is.
It's the same way that special ed is funded in the school system. They say we're gonna redeem for our mandates 100%, and then it was 97%, 60.
You think that's
and it
what's
was
gonna happen? They're gonna come back and say,
67% last
we
time.
can't give you the full
And
rebate,
you
we're
know
only
who
gonna give you
picks it up?
50%?
The rules have yet to be enacted at DES. This goes into effect on January 1st. We have not seen the rules for how this is going to be enacted. We are going to follow the rules to try and get back 100% of the rebate of any surcharge, and we'll work with, fortunately, we actually transport most of our solid waste. But any of the construction and demolition, the bulky waste that gets picked up, we will work with the vendor to try and have them itemize that, so we can get 100% rebate. But because we are gross appropriating, you're going to see that increased in the appropriation side as well as the revenue side.
Okay. And there were already big increases, as I remember, last year to
There's
solid
going to be,
waste.
there's going to be an increase in those as well, because we have a 7-year contract with the landfill that has a price increase that starts on March 31st or April 1st. So there's already going to be an increase in the tipping fee that we pay.
Are landfills privately owned or publicly owned?
The one that we bring it to, it's privately owned. It's in Rochester.
Okay. Peter, you had a question?
So it's a couple of tiers. Do we have an idea what the appropriation we think will look like for this upcoming budget cycle? Because that's just going to add to what, at least appropriation-wise, is showing on our budget.
So if we look at the tonnage times this $3.50, you're talking about $25,000 on the NHDES surcharge. There's going to be another increase because our tipping fees go out. I don't have that number, but we will, I'm sure Adam will present that.
And then my second question is the contractor in this case going to charge us more for administrative fees?
That we don't know.
Okay. I'm assuming this is just going to cost them more to manage.
Yeah, until the rules are in place, it's really
Yeah.
hard to guess
Yeah,
what the
we
vendor's
haven't
budget is
seen the
doing.
rules from DES yet.
Okay. Sam?
When we calculate the revenue side of this, I think, this is just an opinion, I think it might be better to err at it not being 100%. Because I think Jack has made a very excellent point that it's, maybe the first year it's gonna be 100% back, but then it's going to drop, and I would hate for it to come back into DPW's budget, so I would rather us say oh, we're only gonna get 90% of it back.
So that's one of the great things, we can definitely pass along your concerns to the select board when they adopt their projected revenues. I would say Danielle and her team do an excellent job on projected revenues. We have been within hundreds of, less than $100,000 of our projected revenues for many years now. We are very, very close. We've been very fortunate that we have not over-projected revenues, so that when we set tax rate, there's a surprise. So we can definitely take that into account.
So not to go too far down this rabbit hole, but what was the rationale behind passing this bill in the first, do you know what the argument was that why this was a good idea?
I don't know the history behind it, to be honest.
All right.
I think I do. We don't want more landfills in the state, but we're running out of places to put trash. And when the governor was elected, she made a commitment that there was gonna be no new landfills in the state of New Hampshire. And so there's only 6. We gotta put the trash somewhere.
Well, that's kind of like dealing with the problem too far down the road, right? I mean, what are we gonna do with our trash?
I believe that the legislature has a study committee that's looking at landfills and
Okay.
and those issues.
Okay, all right.
And you'll probably remember from last year, Adam had explained that some communities are actually shipping out to like Pennsylvania and stuff, because that's where they were able to get contracts, because each landfill has like a maximum capacity that they're allowed to essentially guarantee to different municipalities. So if you don't get a contract in state, you may be looking at higher costs for transport.
Okay.
It's weird that it affects, because the waste to energy is like an incinerator, right? It's weird that it affects them too, because then there's no, where does the trash go? I guess it goes to.
So, you know, we play a game at my work with these high school kids, and we give a list of laws, and we have them guess which ones are real and which ones are not. It's hilarious, the ones that are real. Allison?
This is a little bit off topic, but not completely. Did I see something that DPW is doing, like there's a drop-off for food waste or something?
The composting
Yeah,
program?
something like that, maybe to try, which sounds crazy, but if everybody did it, we'd actually have less tonnage going to a landfill that we'd have to pay for.
I believe they did start a program, and I believe they actually partnered with the school as well. The
Yeah.
school's composting now as well.
Pilot program through the school.
Good.
What we were told
I feel
about.
like we should talk more about that within our group and within our outside circles. Because this is a cost that every single one of us pay. We sit here and don't want to pay more taxes. So if this could lower, and they have a percentage that's generally food waste that you pay in your tonnage, and we could probably see some significant savings if people were willing to make it a little
Be
hard.
more mindful about how
Be
they
more
dispose
mindful,
of
and
their.
it's going to be a little more work, you're probably gonna have to have a bucket that you keep it in, you're not gonna run to the dump every day, or every time you
Yeah.
finish dinner. But I
That's an
think
interesting idea.
at this point, everybody who complains about taxes, we need to do more as a community then.
It's a good idea. Okay.
So the next one was House Bill 67. This was a 2024 legislative change that had a temporary pilot program where the town could borrow accessible voting systems from the Secretary of State's office. That was supposed to sunset in 2025. We didn't use those at town election in March. That House Bill 67 actually extended that program. So we will be pursuing an agreement with Secretary of State's office to borrow that in the future. So we had $10,000 in the 2025 budget to actually purchase these accessible voting systems. So that will be a savings in this year's budget that we will have. We did budget this year, and we'll need to start budgeting in future years the actual cost of programming the system. So
Did you get that grant for the voting machines that we were supposed to get?
So we will be bringing forward a recommendation on the ballot counting devices. And there is, yes, the state of New Hampshire actually does have a grant to pay for a portion of those. yeah.
Because I remember it was like first come, first serve, so we
No,
were
they,
a little.
that goes through, I believe, 2026. So we are going to be bringing a recommendation to the select board.
Is a voting machine different than a ballot counting device?
I think the legal name in New Hampshire is ballot counting device.
Okay, I was like, are these two different?
They are two different
This,
things.
this one under House Bill 67 is ADA accessible.
Okay.
So that's like the actual machine.
It's like
the
a
ballot
tablet,
number.
it's very, it's much
Okay.
different.
Yeah, so instead of having a paper ballot, you would use this.
Oh, cool.
So those are really the two big ones. Do you want me to go into the bills worth watching, and then, do you want me to do everything town side and then have the school present?
Let's have the school present so we can kind of keep this
Yeah.
straight a little
Yeah.
bit about the
Okay.
things that we know are happening.
Yep. So one that everyone's probably heard about is the cell phone ban. So it's been great to see the kids' faces again. Overall, it's going really well with them leaving the cell phones in their backpacks. That one, we have not spent a lot of money on management of the law, whether that be the yonder pouches or lockers. We haven't felt that's the direction we needed to go. We are buying some devices for individuals who might need them for specific things in their IEP or health or their English language learners. We don't see that being a lot of individuals for that, though. So our biggest impact, which we don't know financially yet what that will be, is that cell phones, we are not a one-to-one district, which means that the kids are not issued their own laptop. So especially at the high school, they used student devices to aid in the learning. And now those student devices are not allowed out from bell to bell. So, you know, our high school, in order to kind of mitigate that, they're thinking about what we might need to purchase to kind of help with that learning aspect as well. Some of that stuff we might purchase this year, some of that will go into the budget next year, but they're still in that collecting of information right now.
So do you mean ADA items, or?
No, I mean, any type, like a device that could help with learning, whether it be, like sometimes they might use their cell phones in order for a teacher to get information on, they might have solved a problem on their cell phone type of thing.
You mean like
And-
use the calculator or something, or?
Yeah, but if they use their cell phone and they solve a problem, then not only are the kids getting instant access on whether they get the problem right or wrong, but the teacher gets a collection of that data so they can see, okay, on this problem, 80% of my students did well on it.
Okay.
I don't have to cover that too much. On this problem, 20% of my kids
Okay,
did
so this is
well.
like Discovery Ed uses this
So
to do
different
instant feedback.
Yeah, different ways to kind of make sure that if you don't luck out and have the laptops in your room that day, you can still use the benefits of technology in education. So different ways that they've been doing that throughout different classes.
Okay.
So again, we don't know the impact. We have started by some devices for specific students that would be now district-owned, where they would have been using their own devices before. Yep.
Have you ever come up with the, like, how many units you'd actually need for at least the high school to be a one-to-one with device?
So not, I mean, how many additional units?
Right.
So not as of now, because part of the problem is that some of our devices are 1 year old, 3 years old, but some of them are like 8 or 9. So how much do you really quantify if we went to, one-to-one? Would you give a student an 8 or 9 year old device? Maybe, maybe not type of thing. If you went to one-to-one, you might give your seniors and juniors some of the older devices, but eventually you gotta kind of start. So we haven't done that yet, but what we're trying to get to, for instance, is at the middle school, a cart per team. At the high school, kind of close to that equivalent as well. So instead of kind of the carts being kind of signed out by anybody, they're part of a smaller group that can kind of work together. So we have been able to build in more computers, but we haven't necessarily fully priced out a one-to-one at this point.
Okay.
All right, another bill that went in was in regards to special education aid. So Jack mentioned this before, so this actually is a positive where the state has a share of the cost of students who their cost per education is over 3.5 times the average for the state. So if the state average is $20,000, then 3.5 times that would be $70,000. So the district would pay all the way up to $70,000, and then over that is now a cost share with the state. Now, the state has a pool of money which they would pull from that. So last year, we were reimbursed 66% of what we should have been reimbursed. The new bill that got passed guarantees that we'd be reimbursed at least at 80%. So last year, that would have been another $100,000 that we would have been reimbursed. Obviously, that's not up to the 100% that we would be expecting the state, but the trend has been to go, like Jack was saying, from 100% to 97%, and we kept going down and down to 66% last year. So that is a positive thing that came from the House, because now instead of going down, we at least have a minimum that will be reimbursed. Another thing that was impacted was the GAP funding, which is an adult program. So when we think about adult program being alternate ways for students to find success. So it would be evening classes, it would be high-set tutoring, which would be, state equivalency, test to show, you have gained that knowledge. It would also be online courses. So last year we had 142 students involved, 30 earned a GAP diploma, and 3 completed the high-set test. And to help us with that, we received a little over $61,000 in grants. So all of that went away, pretty much, well, about 98% of that went away through the House Finance Committee as they eliminated adult ed non-match funding. So the Senate bumped it up for 1 year. They gave a 1-year seed grant and $400,000 in total, which Goffstown received $22,647. So we went from receiving about $60,000 to $22,647 this year, and then we expect to receive less than $1,000 next year. So these are vital programs to make sure that kids find success, whether they, struggled at the beginning or struggled for a semester, they can still find success as they become an adult or a little bit into their adulthood. So we have what we called provided the core of GAP this year. So we scaled it down a bit. So at this year, we're planning on using about $15,500, $16,000 of general fund money in order to make sure that the core parts of GAP can keep on happening. But again, next year, that will have to be bumped up even more in the budget because there is no funding for that. The funding we get would be a little bit less than $1,000. So that's kind of where we're at with the new bills and the financial part.
Laura?
Thank you. Just to make sure I understand, that's 1,000 overall or 1,000 per student?
1,000 overall.
60,000 to 1,000.
Instead of
So-
From 60,000 overall to 1,000?
Yes.
So,
But they're giving us 2 years.
well, thank them for me.
Right, so, Jack.
So, and of course, year to year, you don't know how many students within this program you'll have, because that's based on a lot of different factors.
That's true.
So that 60,000 or 1,000 will be more or less, depending even on just the students within.
So the 1,000 is kind of dependent on, it's a subset identification of Title II students, which
Okay.
isn't a lot. So,
Okay.
we could end up with 300, we could end up with 1,500, but I don't think it would be too far out of that range. And no matter if we end up with 300 or 2,000, that pretty much gets you not much of
Sure,
anything.
right.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
How much does it typically cost, like, per student in the GAP program?
So, I believe it ended up being like $452 per student, as they looked at it, as they kind of divided it out per student.
Okay, so, like, in a year, how much would it be if it's 452? How,
So we use that whole 61,000. As we budget for next year, it's gonna be a little bit less than 61,000, so we're gonna go we're gonna start a little bit above the core. When we talk about the core, we talk about a class in the afternoon, because one of the reasons why GAP is successful is that it's afternoon classes, evening classes. So English class, a math class, a science class, and a social studies class.
Okay.
As well as the online part of it, which is through Edmentum, which is a program, and then the high-set tutoring. So we're going to kind of start with that as our base, and we're going to bump it up by a little bit because we did have things like metalworking or woodworking in there as well. And so we're going to go a little bit above the core to start and kind of see where we end up at that
Okay.
point. But the core is definitely vital, I think,
Yeah.
to the students in this area.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, Doug.
thank you, Elizabeth. Is that 100% subsidized by the state, or government or state in the past, or do people pay tuition for that?
So the students
differences?
who good question, the students who or take part of it, they pay $75, I believe it is, for a half-credit course and $150 for a full credit course. So they do have part of it. I mean, the main thing is to make sure that they want to be there and that financially that they're putting some investment in there as well without making the cost too much where it would deter them from being part of something that is key for them to kind of move up and on in their life.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, want to shift back, Derek, to talk about potential, things you're watching?
Yes, so I highlighted 2 bills on the town side that are bills that we're watching. One that was passed this year was House Bill 282. This bill restored most, but not all, of the New Hampshire retirement system benefits for about 1,500 first responders, so this is police and fire across the state. They were kind of in a transitional when we had a lot of retirement changes that happened in 2011. So they'd been hired prior to July 1st, 2011, but they didn't have the full 10-year vesting. So this change requires approximately what was estimated at $262 million in state funding to municipalities through 2034. $42 million was allocated in this budget and is guaranteed. The rest of the money is going to be have to be appropriated in future state budgets. So it's something that we will be watching, and also we also do expect that the employer contribution rates the next go around in starting not next cycle, but it'll actually be in 2027. We will start to see an increase for those first responder ones. New Hampshire Retirement was able to decrease them under our current rates. They do them every 2 years, but these changes are likely to increase those employer rates in future budgets.
Okay.
And then Senate Bill 245, this has been a kind of a hot topic around the state. This is ambulance billing. It requires insurers to reimburse ground ambulance providers at 325% of Medicare rates. So basically what they've done is they're kind of the ambulance billing and balance billing has been a huge issue around the state, and the state has kind of put a 2-year pause on this, where they're going to bring together a in-depth study committee to look at this. So what that means to us right now, it doesn't mean that much to us. We do put about 10% of the wages of full-time firefighters and fire lieutenants. These are our floor employees that also run the ambulance. So the EMS revolving fund actually supports about 10% of their wages, saving the general fund the full cost. But if we get to a point where we're not able to get good ambulance reimbursement for these trips due to future changes in state law, or our collections become an issue because of changes in state law, we may have to move that 10% back into the general fund. So again, we're not anticipating that in next year's budget, but it is an issue that our fire chief, our fire department, finance department is watching closely.
Okay.
And then the only other, I guess, issues worth watching on the town level, which so similar, is one of the big ones is the share of meals and rooms tax. We've got a little bit of a history here, but since 2021, towns, municipalities have received 30% of total meals and rooms tax revenue that the state collects. There were proposals to reduce that in this year's state budget. And through the efforts of many municipalities as well as NHMA, that failed. However, we anticipate at future budgets that will be a hot topic again and possibly be on the chopping block. Revenues in this year, or that just finished up for the state, were about 3.4% over the prior year. So we're hopeful there'll be a slight increase in this year, but the receipts for July and August, the state's current fiscal year, are actually below the state's budget projections. So on the town projected revenues for 2026, you're likely to see no changes to our meals and rooms, because again, what we're seeing is the trend on the state level is hotel collections are down considerably. And then state aid grants, this doesn't impact the general fund, but it does potentially in some portion impact the sewer commissioners. There was a large reduction in state aid grants for municipal wastewater infrastructure. Again, the sewer commission owns about 7% of the Manchester, any of the infrastructure at the Manchester sewer facility. So we've got that. And then the only item I didn't include in the handout, I thought of it while I was sitting back, was health trusts and risk pools. You may have seen in the Union Leader this year, there was a big push to drastically change how risk pools are traded under state law. The Secretary of State's office claimed they were in danger of becoming insolvent. These are they're similar to insurance providers, but where you have all municipalities and participating school districts pool their risk. So there's some years that we end up paying a little bit more because we have to help cover some of the very expensive insurance claims for the pool. There have been years where we have benefited and we have not, because we have certain claims that are very big. So the bill proposed would have reduced the risk pool reserves and passed the risk on to individual members, so towns and schools. We would have been forced to create our own risk management healthcare stabilization fund. So it'd be like a capital reserve fund, but Senate Bill 297 died this year, but we'll be watching that in probably future years, because that has the potential of having a huge, if we have to go out onto the private market and find insurance for our employees, that would have a huge impact on future budgets.
Okay. Any questions on all that? Okay. Doug, is there anything else you want to let us, that you're watching or that you're concerned about
Yep.
from the state, coming from the state?
Yep, so last year, there was several open enrollment bills, which is the ability for any student to go to any school in the state. So what you do is you identify your space that you have. So for instance, if we said we have space for 100 third graders, and we had 95 third graders, that means we have 5 open spots that could be taken from any student from any town. So this did not go through last year, but we believe it's going to be back on and be reintroduced again this year. Obviously, it would be a major change to education in New Hampshire. There are some unknowns that were from last year as well, including how much would a receiving school be reimbursed, how much would it cost a school to send a student, what would happen if a student had special education costs, transportation costs as well. So there's just a lot of unknowns that as of right now, or even last year, that were part of the bill. We do believe that there's a quality education that's provided in Goffstown, and I think, as school districts around us look at Goffstown, we believe that we would have more students coming to Goffstown than we would have leaving Goffstown. So we do think at the end of the day, we would have revenue from this. So that could be a positive thing. I think a challenge to this too could be the timing of it. So if it passes, bills typically pass in late spring, early summer, and sometimes they're effective the next school year, which would only give a couple months to make sure that everybody was kind of talking the same way within the state, because now instead of working with a couple towns that might send us students, it could be any town that could send us a student at that point. So that is kind of where we are with the state. Federal, we have received pretty much a similar amount of money for any title grants or special education grants. This year, there are starting to be some bills being introduced to reduce some of those amounts of monies that might go to the states for following years. So those are just starting to be introduced, is my understanding.
Okay. Questions about that? All right. Thank you, all three of you, for coming and talking about all this. Hey, when's the tax rate going to get set? Do we know?
October.
October? So I saw a headline, I don't subscribe to the Union Leader, so I couldn't read the article, but that said Goffstown revenues up, expenses down. Isn't that what
So the unfortunate thing about that article is it was looking at the MS 535, which is our year end of 2024,
Oh, man.
which is not something that factors into the tax rate.
All right. Well, what a bummer. What a bait and switch. Okay.
So.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So we will move on to reports and updates from the school board and the select board. You want to go for it?
I think that, what you've heard is pretty much what it is. Through Olivia's update and Doug's, we're looking at that far out interview. We're trying to keep our costs down as we always do. We'll worry about the specifics of a lot of bills that are coming in and just try and manage all that. And obviously, I think the gong was beat pretty hard last year, and I think it'll be a reoccurring thing, is the cost of our tech and our tech support. like with the cell phone ban, how that ends up winding up, you know, computers throughout the school district, and also the increase of all the tech that happens just in the school.
So I also saw an article that said Maple Ave had, what, a record number of third
Record.
graders that they were not expecting?
First graders.
Oh, first graders.
First graders. So they had 11, sort of that. Ended up, they switched a section from fourth grade and increased the fourth grade class sizes a little bit, brought a teacher down to get an extra section of first grade. So it kept the students per class at a better ratio in the first grade. Little, you know, if you believe less is better, then maybe not quite as good in the fourth grade, but certainly a more manageable age to deal with large classrooms, because they were worried about being up in that 24 range, 25 range of first graders, so.
And they didn't have a lot of time, they didn't have a lot of warning for this, did they?
No, they had 11, and it wasn't all from new developments either. Some of it came from the new developments, but they had 11 people that were not, 11 students that were not identified in that, from attending kindergarten or some other way, that came in.
Did
And
they
so-
just show up?
Well, yeah, they moved in, right, but the houses are still selling, right? So they didn't all come from Bog Road, they didn't all come from the mill building. They bought, moved in, some of them came from those places. And we're still looking at more. There's still another 200 and some units out there to come online in the next couple of years, depending on what goes through
Okay,
in the planning board.
okay. Any questions for Jack about the school board?
Yeah, what were the ratios for 1 and 4? Out of the split?
Oh, I'm not right off the top of my head,
Okay.
but we can find that out. That'll all be spelled out when the presentation is done to the full school board. All those ratios will be done by someone smarter than me.
Okay, Richard?
Sure. Like to be able to say that I had a super deep financial update for you guys, but we're not very far into our own budget discussions. But as a little bit of a consolation prize, I have one piece of good news. We're looking at locking in some rates with some of our suppliers for things like electricity. Rates are down right now, so we're going to look at locking in a longer rate to maintain that low point for longer. We have, obviously, we had a road plan to grapple with earlier in the year. Adam gave us a very data-driven recommendation to go with a maintenance-only approach for our roads, but we had some folks come in who lived on some of our worst-graded roads in town and made a pretty convincing appeal that there was just no more time to wait on those roads. So we made some lemonades out of lemons, solved that problem as best we could, and you know, hopefully, I think we've learned a lesson from cutting the road plan last year.
Any questions for Richard? I have one thing to add on the town side. Samantha and I have been working with the library folks on getting that LCHIP grant to do the windows replacement, which is now windows and storm windows replacement. The grant was submitted back in June. They had a site visit from the review team. That they had some questions. One of the questions was they wondered why they had asked the town for 40,000 and that the budget committee cut it to 20. So I wasn't at the site visit, but we have a chance to respond to that. So I was going to, I offered to write a letter to simply explain this is what we did. This was a year when we cut a lot of things at a lot of, you know, really substantial amounts. The library still came out of this with $20,000 of funding, which is a sign of our support. So I just want to let the committee know that. We also have an opportunity. We were not meeting when we were putting together the grant. So the select board voted, took a vote to show their support for the project. We also have the opportunity to make that same vote now if we want to show our support for replacing these windows with the amount that we've already appropriated. The grant would provide the additional amount, so there wouldn't be any additional requests for funding to finish this project. So if we want to do that, we would need a motion.
We didn't vote for it when we set that 20,000?
So the motion would be, or I guess I can just make the motion. I'd like to make a motion that we voice public support for the library's pursual of the LCHIP grant, which is just basically us standing behind the decision that we already made last year.
I'll second
But
it
we're gonna
then.
write it down.
Do we need that in writing before?
It'll be in the minutes.
It would be nice for the LCHIP to have it in writing.
No, I'm just
Oh.
saying, is it important that we're reading that out, like, as a statement? I don't know what I'm
It'll be in the minutes.
saying yes to
So
yet.
I'll include that in my letter that'll just simply say, on this date, the budget committee voted by X numbers in support of this project.
To reaffirm their commitment.
Yeah, to reaffirm the town's commitment to this project. Do people have,
Do you
some
want
of
me
you
to say that a
look
little
like
more
you're
clearer?
puzzled, so I,
I just feel like we already did it.
Yeah,
but
can
we
I
could
just
do-
ask something real quick? So, I guess kind of what Laura was just saying, and I think Brian was about to say, this is exactly what we, for the past 2 years, have asked them to do, right? Was to find grant money to pay for this, because we as a town didn't have enough or available to fund this for. So, I guess, I mean, I'm totally fine with doing this, but I think this is what we did, right? Am I
yeah, I
making
mean,
sense?
the only
or-
reason behind the vote is to make it clear to the LCHIP committee that we stand by what we voted on in the
Well,
last budget season, that we will
Elizabeth, though, we
contribute
can't,
20,000
we
to the
can't go
town.
back on it. We already gave them the 20,000, so yes, we
I
stand
know,
by it.
but it's very much a pro forma vote, because it's a little abstract to say, well, it was in this massive budget, and therefore, that's our support for it.
So
this
with
makes it
people
a little
that
clearer.
weren't on the
Alice,
committee, sorry.
Allison?
I feel like we're maybe overthinking it. Aren't you just basically asking people to reaffirm their support because they came to you and said, why'd you guys cut the funding to 20,000? That's it. Like, no, you can't change it. No, we're not doing anything. No, it's not costing us anymore. It's literally all of us saying, yeah, we know it cut. It was on a year that everything was being cut, and we fully support this. We want the LCHIP to go through. We want them to get new windows. That's all we're doing. It is performative, but it
Yeah.
is still telling them
Okay,
that's what they
I
want
was
to see.
asking,
They
if
want to
it's
know the town
performative or
actually
if
is
we
behind
were
it.
Making
Does it
different choices.
Doesn't increase anything.
Does it increase the probability of them getting the grant?
Yes,
Yes,
There we
yes,
go, that's
what
it.
It
That's all
does
we need.
increase the probability of them getting the grant, because they had asked the group, is this a sign, the fact that it got cut from 40 to 20, is that a sign that your town support is soft?
Right.
And we're like, they
No.
told them no, but we thought, well, since we're gonna put this letter in anyways, we can reiterate
So
it.
the messaging is from this committee, not so much the public at large?
Correct.
Is that-
Right, it's
Okay,
also the
interesting.
committee.
And the letter is simply going to restate what we did. Like, at first, I said, why don't you just tell them to watch the public hearing, the video of the public hearing? But I don't think they'll do that, so it's just gonna be a one-page letter restating, this is what we did, and this is why we did it, and there was support for the project at that level, and we encourage them to go seek this grant.
Okay.
So I have a.
There's a motion on the
second.
table.
Laura
There's a
seconded.
motion on the
Yep.
table, so
Yep.
Yeah.
we have a first, we have a second, is there more discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, that's unanimous, right? Did Richard, I'm sorry, did you see? Okay, just didn't see. Okay, great. All right, Allison?
I have one more thing. Last year, we were able to get the budgets from both the town and the school electronically, so we could kind of muck as spreadsheets. Can we request that we get those again this year?
Sure, if people feel like they need it, yeah.
I thought it was helpful to be able to kind of compartmentalize some of the things differently than they might break them down. For me, at least.
Yeah, I'm fine, I think we should do that. Brian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To kind of piggyback on that, and this is a request, and I wanted to get the committee's I guess, appetite with this, because I'm wrestling with, this is my third year in the Budget Committee, when it has to do with transfers between accounts or sub-accounts. So my request is, could we get, for the last fiscal year between the school and the town of all departments, the transfers and the notes or the descriptions behind the transfers? Because I don't have a good grasp on those, what happened in past, and also what's pending. So if, that's a request from me, from the town and from the school, because I'm still wrestling with that. I can't follow the money very clearly. So
Okay. Logistically, is that difficult to get?
We actually, we have it on our website. We have
Oh.
all
It's
of our budget
required by
transfers.
state law.
I
Yeah,
think it's-
Could you send that link
think it's
to
out there through
everyone?
the school system also.
Jack, or, sorry.
We don't have the transfers on the website.
No,
We
no,
have the
that's okay,
manifest and we
yeah.
have the check register now on the website. I'll take a look at how easy it is to get the transfers kind of all in one area.
Okay.
I know that
Can I ask
Scott
a
produced a list
clarifying?
last year of it.
So Brian, do you mean like when they say like, okay, we didn't need this teacher here, just for an example, but we do need them here, so there's no change in the amount, it's just a change in the placement? Like, would that be an example of what you
that's
mean?
one example, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's more like different categories, like, we didn't have to buy 25 erasers, so
Sure, that would include
instead,
that
we
too.
spent the money on the electricity bill. So, I mean, I think it's like when it's actually moving categories, because a teacher from one, like saying if, as long as the teacher was in the building, that would still be in the same line.
Well, no, but sometimes it goes to the high school from the
Right.
middle school or something.
True.
We talk about that a lot, that's why, that was the first thing that popped
Okay.
into my head, so that's why I wanted to make sure I was thinking about it correctly.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, well, I can comment further. I think the one thing that kind of comes to mind, and I don't know it well enough, but where the select board transfers monies from various accounts to increase the road reclamation project, it came from various buckets. And to me, I can see that, but I need a broader story, I need a broader description, and so that's what I'm looking at. I don't really know the decisions behind that and how it came to be. So I'm looking for that from a very broad scale.
So you're talking about the source of the savings and the rationale for
Correct.
shifting the funding?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
The rationale is a lot harder to find than the.
I
than the
agree.
line item transfer. I
Right.
think that's, you need to watch the meetings of the minutes.
Yeah, so that's my request, because I'm still wrestling with it.
The reason that they do it is so they can meet their bottom line budget and fund all the things they need to do. Right? That's why we
But I think the
transfer
question is,
from line to
why
line.
didn't they fund this other thing that they thought they were gonna fund? I mean, it's all a matter of priorities, but at the very
True.
least, we should be able to get you the numbers and
Yeah.
the movement from account. And if the rationale isn't there, and you have a question about the rationale, you can ask.
Yep.
So, okay. Danielle?
For example, I think some of the rationale you would get from watching the meeting, for instance, with like the road plan for Laurel Street, the actual transfer of funds was fairly minimal. The cost of the project was just shy of $500,000, but the transfer was only about $185,000, $184,000, because the select board went through the list of roads that were identified for maintenance and specifically said, don't do these 7 roads that you were already going to do with that money, and instead do this road. And in order to get that road done, you're gonna need an extra $184,000 because the maintenance reallocation, which is all in the same line, isn't enough to cover it. So there was a transfer, and that's itemized out as to.
So the only
where
thing
money
you'll
came
see in the
from.
budget transfer is a transfer from insurance benefits, from highway operation consulting services, sidewalk maintenance, and then all of that added up to $184,000. But the, don't do this road, that's in the meeting minutes.
Minutes, yeah.
Allison, do you have a question?
I was just gonna say, so it just seems like you're not gonna get any rationale from it. Like, you're literally only gonna get.
You're gonna have
Move from this
a
to
line
this,
from,
and there
line
will be
to,
like-
and we
right.
do put a cause and purpose of transfer, so there is like
There's
a
something
a sentence that explains the purpose, but yeah, some of the other things like roads not to do, that's captured in the meeting minutes.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Did you have something else, Danielle?
We have this one more item on the agenda for
The
school.
town and school liaison
liaison.
updates?
Yeah.
Didn't we just do that?
That was the select board and school rep updates.
Oh,
The
okay.
liaison is us as staff.
okay.
If you
Sorry.
want to hear. What's going on? That's fine. What's going on?
Of course we want to hear.
Yes, of course.
Just a few things, budgetarily that are on our radar that we just want to make sure we mention. As we started preparing the 2026 budget, we had been planning, we knew that 2026 was going to have 53 Thursdays in it because it happens every 4 or 5 years, and that's been discussed in the past. However, when we actually went to crunch the numbers, we realized the very first one is January 1st. So because it's a holiday and banks are closed, we pay it on 12/31. So it's a really unique opportunity for us to take a close look at the numbers. And in this case, we're going to be bringing a recommendation to the select board at their next meeting, so you'll see that on the agenda, to see if they'd be willing to fund that out of 2025, because it's going to be paid in 2025, which will keep us from having to add an extra week of payroll in next year's budget process and increase what we're asking for from the tax appropriation. Another couple of things on the radar. We have some unplanned expenditures that are on our radar. We don't know if they will occur or not, but the fire department had a total pump failure of one of the tower trucks. So we know from the meetings that they've gone to at the select board that that's estimated a little over $40,000. And we are looking into options. The chief's working with the manufacturer to see if there's any sort of warranty or any type of coverage at all. It is not something that's covered by the town's insurance. So if that needs to be addressed, that could be an unplanned expenditure that the board would have to see what they could do. Another thing also from fire is PFAS contamination. They've been working with DES, I think, since 2023 on testing different sites, trying to figure out if there's any contamination. So that's an item that's continuing to go back and forth between the state and the town. So at this point, we don't have an answer from the state as if we need to do remediation or additional drilling sites to test, but that is on our radar as a possibility as well. And then some items that you're going to see in our budget, just to always be aware of, are legal lines. Legal spending across departments is way overspent. So you're going to see that we've underspent in other categories to try to offset that, and we will be increasing those requests in the 26 budget because we're finding that the cost of legal needs is just more increased than it had been historically. And then
Danielle, is that due to people, to lawsuits, or is it due to seeking legal opinions?
A little bit of both.
It's the majority, at least in my department that I can speak of, is I've got 3 land use appeals that are currently either before the Superior Court or Housing Appeals Board. So those
really
aren't
jack up.
$1,000 a month, those are like $12,000 a month when you get that bill.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then there are certain things that we do have to consult with legal on, whether they're contracts or requests that we've received. And then kind of another thing, I probably should have thrown this in when I was talking about the fire pumps, but also related to fire apparatus, the insurance company, Primex, which they cover, they're a pooled risk group that covers municipalities for property liability, workers' comp, unemployment. And they have a limit on fire apparatus of 15 years for their total replacement cost. So if our vehicles, if you look at our CIP, are on a 20-year replacement schedule, and they're 1.4, 1.7 million per item. So you don't really want to do them earlier. But at the same time, if the insurance isn't going to cover the full value of that vehicle, and it's a total loss and they're depreciating the value, that's a big problem. So we've brought to their attention the fact that this gap is really putting communities in a difficult spot, and they are working with their actuaries to see if they can modify their rules to extend that coverage a little bit further, because basically every piece of apparatus we own, except for 2 or 3 items, would be beyond that.
Okay.
I have a quick question about that. Does that include that it takes multiple years to get the apparatus at this point as well?
That was part of our point to them is even if we wait the 20 years and then we order it, now we're not getting it to that vehicle's 24 years old,
Right,
25
okay.
years old. So that's creating a problem. Even if they turned around and said, effective immediately, this coverage change and the town wanted to go and fix it and get all qualifying apparatus, we physically couldn't get apparatus quick enough to be covered at that full rate. So they do still cover the vehicles, but they cover depreciated value of the vehicle, which of course, when you're talking about something that's 20 years old, its value is going to be much less. So,
Okay.
those are just a few items.
Unrelated, who's up for CBAs this year?
Teamsters, DPW.
DPW. On
That
the
it?
town, on the town side.
Yeah, and
Oh,
And then just who?
Yeah.
Teachers.
Oh, just the teacher.
teachers and DPW.
Doug, do you have an update?
Yeah, so it's definitely becoming harder to hire school staff within New Hampshire for a lot of towns. Goffstown did quite well. We're down to not a lot of vacancies. We have one special education teacher, 3 custodians, one at the high school, one at the middle school, and a part-time at Glen Lake, and substitutes and some paraprofessionals. So partly I mentioned that to let you know that we've done well, but if people are listening, we definitely appreciate when they apply and if they become part of our team. So we are negotiating currently with the teachers union. That is, obviously our larger union. They tend to have a 3 or 4 year contract in the past. Our goal is to kind of have that be part of our warrant, a warrant article this year as well. As we look at the rest of the budget, we're trying to be conservative in nature because our goal is to retain these teachers as much as possible. If there's not a lot of people applying anymore, we're going to be better off if we can retain the teachers that we have. We do have some challenges with the budget. Part of that is the MST or the technical school, so our students go to Manchester for that. So that'd be for things like plumbing, automotive, healthcare, which could lead to like an LNA type of license. So when we receive our invoice, we're billed 25% of the total cost. But what happens at the end of a year is if the state doesn't make up the rest of that 75%, we get billed the remainder of that. So the last time we had that final bill was fiscal year '24. So instead of paying 25%, we paid 57% of the total cost. So like another $217,000. We're expecting that same type of invoice to happen for last year in the amount of about $240,000. So we have reserved that money from last year because it had to do with last year's students, but that would have been an additional $240,000 that could have gone to offset taxes. So we do have the amount that will go to offset taxes in general. So the projected amount was $1.7 million. We came in at a little over $2.5 million. So again, projected was $1.7 million, but we have $2.5 million to be used to offset taxes as people get their tax rates coming up October, December. Enrollment, we talked about that a little bit at first grade, but it continues to be just a challenge overall space-wise at Maple Ave. They have no more space to put people. We were able to kind of, like Jack said, take a 4th grade position and make it into a 1st grade position, partly to kind of keep it neutral budget-wise, but also because we just don't have space. There's no more room to put teachers in as well. So enrollment and space issues at Maple, as well as in 5th grade at Mountain View. So that is will be a problem as the years move on as well.
Allison,
Yep.
another question?
Is that going to relate up to space issues in middle school and high school as well?
So we don't overall have space issues at the middle and high school. So we do have some room for growth there. So, and Bart,
But with the bigger, like, 1st grade class now, is that going to, as those kids move from, like, Bartlett being busting at the seams, is that going to, as those kids make it to middle and high school, cause a problem, or we're still good at that point?
as of now,
think so.
I think we're still good. It depends on all these developments,
Right, of
whether,
course.
we have, the average of 0.4 kids moving in per 1-bedroom house or things like that, or whether we have an increase from that or a decrease on what historically has happened when you have a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom. But right now, I believe we're pretty good still in the middle school and the high school for
I think
space.
the other side of that would be continued large enrollments.
Right.
of first graders.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
I
our-
knew that was
Would be our bit, year after year.
that could be a changing target, but I just
Buck the
generally
trend,
meant
but
with
how
as
far?
we are right now.
Laura?
Thank you. So again, with the state, like saying they're gonna pay something and then not, so what is their is there no obligation? They can just say, oh, we're gonna pay this, and then they can say, oh, we're not. There's no contract, there's nothing?
It just depends on what they have allocated towards it. So if they have like 9 million allocated towards technical schools in New Hampshire, then what they do is they take off the amount for transportation that they spent first for it, and then they divide it up amongst whatever's left over. They divide it up amongst the rest of the cost for.
So, and I apologize if this is simple and I should already know. So like, for example, within the Goffstown town budget, if we need roads, so we need to, be careful in some other places because we really have to reprioritize when things are, the state doesn't do that.
So, no, there is a portion that we do get from the state for roads, it's a highway.
No, but like,
She-
that was,
She means like, does the state have to transfer, reallocate? They don't. They have the ability as a legislator to simply take a vote to say, we're gonna freeze such and such, we're not gonna pay it out. And that's
So-
what they do for
and then
state
we're
share.
just stuck.
So a couple of years ago, Governor Sununu came out in like in June and said, why don't we do a summer without meals and rooms tax? The municipalities lost their mind, and we just said, whoa, if
'Cause
you
you
do
count
that.
on that.
Yes, we count on that, and if we don't get what we estimated and what was promised in the budget, then what we're gonna have to do is put it on the property taxes.
Right.
So, yeah, so there's always that potential. Right now, state revenues are down.
And you can't
How
count on
the
any.
the legislators would deal with that, I don't know. Hopefully, they don't go after those revenues that come to the town or the schools.
Yeah, but they do have
They have the
the
ability.
flexibility, really, to make that decision.
Okay.
So the last part is just some exciting news. So Bartlett was recognized for their growth in the statewide testing, which was great. So the state is going to recognize them as well. And again, that growth doesn't come without the hard work of the kids, the teachers, the staff there, the administration, as well as the support of the parents and guardians. So it's definitely just a positive thing that they've been able to celebrate now for a couple of weeks now that it's been released, which is great.
A growth in test scores, in case you didn't hear that.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, is it
Not a
academics?
growth in number of kids. but
It's academics overall.
improvement in the-
Academics, I
Okay.
believe it's more the reading, writing
Right.
part. I think the math went up too, but I think that the level that the reading and writing went up was significant.
Great. And the cistern product was done on time and within budget.
On time, on budget. Yes, yeah, you don't get to hear that too often, but when you do, another thing to celebrate.
Great. All right, well, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna wrap it up here. So we have one more regular meeting, that's on October 21st. Then we jump into our deliberations on October 28th. And then we start 2 nights a week with a few exceptions, and we're just gonna go straight through. So we have it scheduled out through December 18th. I'm really hoping we won't have to go that late, but it is on the books if we need it. And we are not doing, as I mentioned before, we're not doing the presentation with the school board. They're getting their own budget presentation. We will get the budget presentation when they're done with it. So we will have more up-to-date numbers, and we'll be getting the town and the school at roughly the same time, which I think will be a little better, a little more balanced.
So what dates are we gonna be doing that on?
That starts on the 28th, and we haven't sorted out which nights we're doing which yet. We're gonna wait till we get a little closer and see where everybody is in their budgets, but just figure we'll be starting presentations on the 28th and doing them for as long as we need to, and then transfer over to deliberations after that. So, okay, any other questions or anything else to come before the board or the committee? Okay, then I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Second? All those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, we're done.